Welcome in once again to the Waiver Wire podcast here at 444 Fantasy Football. I am Matt Okada, your host and the author of the Waiver Wire column, which is published up and readable as I speak at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Monday morning. It is it's still technically week 6. We have one more game, but it is going to be the week 7 Waiver Wire as soon as we get past this Monday Night Football matchup between the Bills and the Jets, which should be a very fun one and has some implications for the waiver wire, as we'll come to find out in a little bit. Teaser alert. We will get into the top 5 ads of the week in just a second, but as a reminder, if you've got any questions, drop them in the YouTube or Twitter chats if you're here live. If you're not here live and you're listening to this afterward, you can always hit me up on Twitter at Matt Okada, and I will almost certainly DM you back unless you send me a full treatise and expect me to write a full treatise back. I am a busy man. But let's get into the top 5 ads of the week. It was a very, very fun week, I would say. A lot of high-scoring games, some close ones, but just felt like fantasy players were getting the points they're supposed to. So that was cool. Part of the fallout of that, Josh Downs is the number one waiver priority on the week. Now, if you've been reading the column or listening to this show or watching it live, you will note I only have about a 10% max fab bid on Josh Downs, which is quite low for a number one ad of the week. And yes, that is true. This week is not very top heavy. There are not any superstars here. There is no one that's rostered in 10% of leagues that's suddenly going to win you your league or make, a rest of season, a massive rest of season impact, most likely. However, Josh Downs, I believe, is the closest thing to it, given how well he's performed with Joe Flacco. I said last week, I don't know if I said it in the podcast, but I said it in the column, which is why you should be reading the column because you can get this deep dive info, that if Joe Flacco was guaranteed to start the rest of the season and we were going to have Josh Downs with Flacco for the entirety of the remaining 11 games, so yes, math. Josh Downs would be not only a massive waiver pickup, like a 50% fab bid type of guy, but possibly a legitimate low-end wide receiver 2 in PPR rest of season. He has been really, really solid, and he is just a really, really solid receiver. A good underneath possession type, get open, route running, sure hands type of sort of Keenan Allen-y wide receiver. Last 3 games with Flacco, he's had at least 9 targets in all 3. He has caught at least 7 balls in all 3, and he recorded at least 66 yards in all 3. And he also scored 3 weeks ago and this past week, which is, a pretty huge added bonus for a PPR type receiver. All this being said, we do not expect that he will have Joe Flacco rest of the season. It looks like it's going to be Anthony Richardson very soon. Richardson was, I believe, active as the emergency quarterback for this game, but they did not want to run him out there unless necessary, which, as it turned out, it was not necessary because they beat the Titans 20-17. Now, I will say a couple things. One, Richardson has been awful to start the season. Unbelievably inaccurate, throwing picks willy-nilly. It's been really ugly. But he was not playing with Downs. Downs was hurt for the time that Richardson was in. And then as soon as Downs came back was when Flacco took over. So we haven't seen Richardson this year with Downs. It is not impossible that Downs provides Anthony Richardson with a safety blanket type of receiver that he hadn't had early on in the season, a possession type guy who can help bump Anthony Richardson's awful completion percentage. And therefore, Anthony Richardson starts targeting Downs heavily upon his return, and things go much better than we maybe expect that they could. That is a possibility. However, I do feel very strongly that it will not be as good as it could be with Flacco. It's just a question of how far down Downs falls, no pun intended, once Richardson returns. So I'm going to hope that it is that theory that I just laid out where Richardson finds Downs, starts targeting him as a reliable underneath, get completions, get first downs type of guy, rather than just what Richardson had been, which is throw a pick or go 3 and out or chuck a 60-yard bomb to Alec Pierce. And so every once in a while we accidentally score. That's not feasible. It's not sustainable. Whoever's in charge of Downs, the quarter, or of Richardson, the quarterback coach, the offense, the coordinator, and the head coach, all need to sit Richardson down and say, "This is what we need to do moving forward. This is how we need to run the offense." And Downs should be a big part of that. So that is the optimistic outlook. As Macintosh fam says in the chat, I hope AR would just get benched rest of the season. Lowell, Pittman, Downs owners would like that. Exactly correct. I'm not saying yet that it's impossible because if I was the head coach of the Colts, I might strongly, or the GM or whoever's making this choice, I might strongly consider let's let our young, raw, clearly underdeveloped quarterback sit a year under Joe Flacco, learn, and then next year, because it's not like they're going to win A, the division with the Texans playing that they are, B, anything in the playoffs with their team as it is. And then we'll come back next year and see if he can be much improved. I don't think it's going to happen. They drafted him way too highly, and he's been their starter, win healthy for 2 years now. But it would be nice. All that being said, Downs is still a strong ad. That's just the reason that he's not a 20, 30, 40% fab bid, and he's down here at 10%, but he's still the number one priority for me on the week. All right. Number 2 is another wide receiver. It is Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, you may say to me, Matt, I just watched Sunday Night Football. No, not Sunday Night Football. The late Sunday game. Jalen Tolbert just had 4 catches for 43 yards on 5 targets. That's not very good. That's not doing it for me, even in the PPR league. And the Cowboys as a whole were absolutely abysmal, scoring 9 points. And to you, I would say, true, valid-ish. I'm not going to judge the Cowboys offense or Jalen Tolbert off of that absolute travesty of a performance against the Lions. That may have been the worst I've seen Dak Prescott and this offense look in maybe ever, certainly years. Prescott was 17 of 33 for 178 yards and 2 picks and no touchdowns. He had a 42 passer rating. They also couldn't rush the ball. Rico Dowdle led the team with 25 yards. CeeDee Lamb was the only thing that was any good. And on 14 targets to only have 7 catches for 89 yards, even that's not good. I don't think this Cowboys offense is what it was last year. It is much worse, but it is not this bad. And what we had seen from Tolbert prior to this was that he was ascending into, particularly with Brandon Cooks out on IR, a clear number 2 role for the Cowboys. He was still that this past week-ish. Rico Dowdle was heavily involved in the passing game, and Kevontae Turpin had 7 targets, oddly. Didn't really do anything with them. And in fairness, I shouldn't say too oddly. Turpin, it feels like the clear number 3 option right now. Having said that, when Brandon Cooks returns, which he went to IR 2 weeks ago, so I think he's eligible in 2 more weeks, it feels like he will replace Turpin in this pecking order, and Tolbert will remain where he is as a clear number 2 for Dak Prescott. Now, it is worth noting the Cowboys are on bye this next week. So you're not, sprinting to the wire to add Tolbert with the perception of starting him this next week, because you won't be able to. That'll be very foolish. He'll get you 0 points on his bye week. However, if you're in a little bit deeper league and you have the bench spots to pick up a guy who's a fringe starter that's also on bye, which admittedly not everybody has that room, I think Tolbert would be the one for me. He's a flex option. I think he should be a flex option weekly, but has wide receiver 2 upside. Again, not the hottest week for the waiver wire, so that's why this guy who's on bye and is just a 4 to 5% bid type of player is a number 2 waiver priority, but still like him quite a bit. Add him in deeper leagues. Number 3 is Jacoby Meyer. That's right. We're sticking at the wide receiver position, and we're sticking with a guy who didn't do very much in week 6. In fact, He did absolutely nothing because he missed the game with an ankle injury. Uh, uh yes, I am recommending adding a wide receiver, I don't know, 4, whatever he's been, who missed last week with an injury and is technically still injured and is not yet the wide receiver 1 on his team because Devontae Adams has not yet been traded. However, we are looking ahead in fantasy football. We are looking to the future because that is where we can still score fantasy points. And Jacoby Myers to me feels like a good ad still. Yes, the Devontae Adams trade rumors have cooled off, I will say. They're not dead by any means, but what was previously he's absolutely guaranteed to get moved as little as like a week ago has now cooled to there's still a couple teams interested. He's probably maybe going to get traded, but if you're Antonio Pierce, you're saying that he'll be playing for us once he's healthy and we still love him, blah, blah, blah. How things go for the Jets tonight against the Bills could play an interesting part of this. If Garrett Wilson doesn't have an incredible game and no one else steps up in that receiving core and they lose to the Bills, a divisional matchup that could very well decide things in the division if they're competing at the end of the year, they will maybe be hard pressed to make a move for Devontae Adams. If the Saints, if Chris Olave, who suffered a concussion this past Sunday, is set to miss a little bit of time, and the Saints say, well, we might need to pick up a receiver, and we just lost to a divisional rival. In fact, we got smacked by a divisional rival in the Buccaneers. They may want to go trade for Adams. It's worth noting those are the two teams Adams wants to go to because of his prior play with those quarterbacks. I don't actually know how strongly the Saints are in the conversation. We'll see. The Bills were previously noted in the conversation. And so if the reverse happens tonight and Josh Allen with Khalil Shakir out again has an incompetent offense and can't move the ball because he doesn't have any functional wide receivers, and they lose to the Jets in a divisional matchup that could be important end of season, maybe they will make a move. And then the Steelers are still potentially interested. So there's still opportunity here for Devontae Adams to get traded. If that happens, Jacoby Myers is an excellent ad, potential wide receiver 2 down the stretch, especially in PPR leagues, as the number one option the number one wide receiver option for the Raiders. If Adams doesn't get traded, Myers can still be flexed every now and then. So the fact that he's not a high investment ad here, especially coming off injury, I don't think there's going to be a lot of rush to the waiver wire to get him, means that the investment you're putting in to get a guy based off the hope that Adams gets traded is not that expensive. And if it ends up not happening, you didn't overpay. It's not like you're, dropping 30% of your fab bid to get Myers with the Adams situation. Though it's worth noting, if Adams gets traded, that could be what people end up paying. So that's why we're trying to do this now ahead of time, 4 to 5% of your budget, number 3 in the waiver priority, to get him before the Adams trade. And if it doesn't happen, you still might have a chance to flex him every now and then. So that's the move I'm making for Jacoby Myers. At number 4, another wide receiver. Yes, another wide receiver. The top massive section of the waiver column is wide receivers. The running back position is messy right now, particularly with, finally, thank you, everybody, Bucky Irving and Tank Bigsby getting heavily added. So they're above the rostership cutoff for the column. So I did not have to include them again this week. Thank goodness. Demario Douglas, also known as Pop Douglas, is essentially, it would appear, the top wide receiver for the Patriots right now. Now, that is not an exciting place to be. Team-wise, this offense is terrible, and it is still not good with Drake May. And there are a lot of other, wide receiver 4 type guys competing for the top role here. However, Drake May does look better than Jacoby Brissett did and looks more lucrative for this offense. And Demario Douglas has looked pretty good now for a few weeks running. He has had exactly 9 targets in 3 of his last 4 games, and he had 6 or more catches in all 3 of those. And on Sunday, he had his best game of the year, 92 yards and a touchdown against the Texans. He seems like probably without doubt, actually, the best wide receiver play for the Patriots. And with Drake May, who, you know, didn't look great as an NFL quarterback, but did not look bad as a fantasy asset or a fantasy dealer for the offense. He threw for 243 yards and 3 touchdowns, also 2 picks, but that doesn't matter to our fantasy wideouts. That's a pretty nice bit of upside that May is now adding to the offense that Jacoby Brissett simply did not. So Demario Douglas is quick, explosive, can take very short slant passes and make a whole bunch out of them. That makes him, I think, an intriguing ad for Drake May now at quarterback. And most importantly, both these guys get the Jaguars next week. The Jaguars are an unbelievably attractive matchup. I don't know if anybody remembers the Cardinals for tight ends a few years ago. I think it was about 3 years ago, when they were so bad against tight ends that you could start literally anyone against them and they would score 10 fantasy points. The Jaguars are that this year for passing attacks in general. It is atrocious for the Jacksonville defense, but it is amazing for us streaming players against this team. So roll out Demario Douglas this next week. He's literally an add and start. Like in a flex, yes. In a wide receiver 3 slot, yes. In a wide receiver 2 slot, maybe, yes. Especially with bye weeks happening. Although I don't think there's a lot of teams on bye this week. Week 7. Let me check. It is just 2. What is this bye week schedule, NFL? You've got some splaining to do. There are teams on bye all the way through like week 14, and there are weeks when you've got 6 teams on bye. And here in week 7, right in the middle of the season, when it would be great to have people on bye, it is just the Cowboys and the Bears. I do not understand. That being said, Demario Douglas is still startable this week against the Jaguars, and I think he's a good ad regardless. So pick him up. At waiver priority number 5, it is our first running back. However, I will note this is kind of a semi-ad, semi-waiver priority number 5. It is a placeholder with Braylon Allen because he has not played this week. He is going to play tonight, Monday Night Football, against the Buffalo Bills, who are a very bad run defense. We will see how much of the work Breece Hall gets and whether Braylon Allen has a game worth writing home about. Obviously, you can't, in most leagues, put waivers through right now after Sunday games, but before Monday night game, because most leagues don't run their waivers till Tuesday. Things are locked. So you're not adding him now. You are adding him pretty much regardless of what happens on Monday Night Football, however, and that's why he's here. I have him, as I have had many of these players in the top 5, at a 4 to 5% fab bid. He has been in the waiver wire columns for several weeks now. Tank Bigsby and Bucky Irving were the 2 guys that were like in that trio with him as the quote unquote backups or RB2s on their team who really needed to be added. And those 2 guys have been added, but Braylon Allen is still available in over half of Yahoo leagues. So he needs to be picked up. He should be rostered, stashed away in literally every league, maybe outside 8-teamers. He is probably the best handcuff in terms of upside with injury to starter in all of fantasy. He also brings some flex viability, but not as much as maybe a couple of the other guys like Tank Bigsby, who I don't even know if he's a handcuff anymore, by the way. Hopefully you were some of the people to add him. And go check your waiver wire just for fun because he's over the rostership limit, but he's still available in some leagues. Sorry, that's a sidetrack. Braylon Allen, if something happened to Breece Hall, would be a potential RB1 for fantasy. He would be the RB1 for the Jets. So that is a guy we want tucked away on our benches if possible. We'll see what happens tonight. Obviously, if something happens to Breece Hall tonight, Braylon Allen's fab bid would be massively increased. Hopefully, that's not the case, both for Breece Hall managers and for your cheap pickup on Braylon Allen. If you do pick up Braylon Allen, then you're kind of hoping for a Breece Hall injury, which is unfortunate, and we don't really want to do that. But that's how we play fantasy football. We play for the contingencies. We set up for what could be. And what could be for Braylon Allen is a huge rest of the season. 4 to 5% budget on him, pending what happens tonight. At number 6, because Braylon Allen is kind of a funky slide-in ad. I have included Isaac Guerendo at number 6. Anyone who paid attention to last week's Thursday Night Football game was probably wondering why it took so long for me to get to Guerendo, considering what he did for the 49ers with Jordan Mason's injury. Jordan Mason suffered a AC joint sprain on TNF, and we don't know what the prognosis is, whether he'll miss any time. But Guerendo came in and immediately took 10 carries for 99 yards, most of them on a 76-yard breakaway run, showing what he can do. You're not going to empty the vault here, which is why Guerendo is down here as, priority number 6, because I don't expect Mason to miss a ton of time. And there was even word that he could have played in that game in an emergency, but didn't for pain management reasons. So I think Mason should be back. But it is always worth noting, whoever is toting the rock for Kyle Shanahan in this offense is going to be very good for fantasy. So it is not a bad idea to stash Guerendo away if you can. If Mason does miss time, Guerendo is an automatic start. If Mason, plays next week, it's still possible that you want Guerendo on your bench as a handcuff stash. And then, of course, there's the fact that CMC might come back in a month or so, in which case both these guys lose their value. But for the short term, if you need a really short-term spot start, feel free to add him. That's my priority number 6. And that is the entirety of the Week 7 top 5/6 waiver list. Josh Downs, Jalen Tolbert, Jacoby Myers, and Mario Douglas, 4 solid wide receivers, and Isaac Guerendo plus Braylon Allen, depending what happens tonight. Okay, let's get into some Q&A. I know I saw one interesting question about a waiver wire guy that was completely missing, and I will get to that. But let's start at the top. First of all, William E. says, took my first L. Thank you, Marvin Harrison Jr. Get well soon. You know what, William? It is not impossible that I also took my first L this week, specifically because Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt. I am trying to check right now on my team. Nope, it is not that team. But I am taking my first L in one league this week. It's more actually because of his teammate, Kyler Murray, pooping the bed. Unless Garrett Wilson pops off tonight. No, even if he does that, I'm not going to win. Yeah, unfortunate. Such is life, William. Good for you for going 5-1 to start the season. Dubs says, got offered Olave and Kirko Chains for Jameson Williams. Win or loss, 12-team PPR. Well, I would be curious what your quarterback situation is, Dubs, because getting Kirko Chains doesn't really do anything for you if you've got like Josh Allen in a 1 QB league. This is interesting because Chris Olave is hurt and was underperforming prior to injury, and Jameson Williams has been pretty good, but is like flashy, like flash good. Even this past Sunday night or a Sunday evening, he had 76 yards and a touchdown, but it was just on 3 catches on 4 targets. So it's kind of unreliable with him. You would expect Chris Olave to be more reliable given his target share, but even that is somewhat questionable given the ups and downs he's had. I think you're probably doing this pending Chris Olave being back quickly, which he should. Most people come back in a week from concussions, although we've seen a couple not do that, a.k.a. Malik Neighbors, who's missed 2 weeks. So keep an eye on that, but if you need to pull this to trigger immediately, I think I would go ahead and do it here. Again, pending the quarterback situation. I mean, maybe not pending the quarterback situation, because I guess the point here I'm saying is that Olave might be more valuable than Jameson Williams straight up, and you're getting a Kirko Chains as for free, essentially. Oh, you went on to... No, this is somebody else. So yeah, that's my answer, Dubs. Chi Kamo Kez says, I'm carrying Fields, Geno, and Baker. Who do I drop? Need to make room on bench. Well, it's certainly not Baker Mayfield. He is legitimately a top 3 quarterback at this point. He was in a tough matchup this past week and threw for, I want to say 3 or 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns, 325 yards. Also 3 picks, but it didn't matter. And he rushed for 29 yards, by the way, which more than cancels out one of those picks. I think it's Gino here, pending if we get some news from from the Steelers camp on Russell Wilson. He was finally ready enough to play this past week and was the quarterback 2 for the team rather than the emergency quarterback 3, which he had been all season, which means he's healthy enough to take the job if they want to make that move. Mike Tomlin had 1 and 2 to start the season, but Justin Fields has gone 4 and 2 and been pretty decent. Uh, I noted in the article on Justin Fields where I have him as a pickup that he has scored 10 total touchdowns, only 5 passing, but 10 total because he scored 5 on the ground, and that's top 10 in the league among quarterbacks. So, and again, 4 and 2. It's hard to make a quarterback move away from a guy who has led you to a strong winning record. And you've got a good defense. You're relying on the run game. Justin Fields is managing that decently well. So, assuming he's still the starter, I'd rather have him over Geno. If we get news early on this week that they're planning to make the move next week, then of course you're dropping him and keeping Geno. Dubs did go on to add the context, literally has Josh Allen as well, the example I gave. So Kirk Cousins is basically useless to you. I'd rather maybe try to get something else in this move, especially with Olave hurt and Jameson having a big week. If you can, make a pitch here, you're trying to trade me a concussed wide receiver for a guy who just had a great game and get something else of use, I might try to do that. Kirk Cousins is, literally only ever going to start in your bye week, in Josh Allen's bye week, which, let's just look for fun, is week 12. So that's a million years away. You can probably find a better streamer by then. You're lying to me. I just had to check. Kirk Cousins' bye is in week 12. There's absolutely no way you want anything to do with Kirk Cousins. He is useless to you. Get somebody else. Chikamo Kez comes back and says, what if Richardson comes back? Downs' value goes down. Okay, so that was a question that got asked when I was talking about Josh Downs. Yes, his value goes way down, as I noted. Dubs says, I have Downs and Tolbert. Well done. I imagine you are either listening to this podcast or reading the waiver wire column, because both of them were in it last week, or you're just super smart. Macintosh fam says, I think the Cowboys not placing importance on their run game is biting them back. Agreed, Macintosh fam. I know that this is a passing league, but you still need to have a good run game to have a functional offense that's not one-dimensional. Jason Quinn asks, would you drop Jerome Ford? If so, how would you prioritize Guerrero, Ty Chandler, Jalen Warren, Kimani Vidal, half PPR? Well, I would drop Jerome Ford because I believe he's banged up. He got a little banged up this past week, and Nick Chubb is expected to be back next week. However, these are a bunch of handcuff type guys pretty much. So you're dropping a handcuff for a bunch of handcuffs. Guarendo technically is a second handcuff because if CMC comes back, he'll be the third string. Right now, he may be the only one who has a starting job if Jordan Mason misses time. So I actually have him, Kimani Vidal, and Ty Chandler in this week's waiver column, and they are prioritized in that order. Jalen Warren is also a viable-ish pickup, but he's not been what we kind of hoped he could be this season. Dealing with a lot of injury, but also not really doing much when he's started. All that being said, essentially, I don't love any of these guys. I think I would go for Guarendo if you need a short-term ad, and Kimani Vidal if you need an upside stash down the stretch. Jesse Driscoll says, did something crazy, bro. I'm 4-1, but hate my team. That's a strange combo. Traded my Breece Hall for CMC. RBs are Achane, Montgomery, Connor, Mason, Braylon Allen. Wide receivers are Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., Kupp, Puka, McLaurin. QB is Daniels. Thoughts? Achane, Montgomery, Connor, Jordan Mason, and Braylon Allen, and you went and acquired CMC for Breece Hall. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think you've asked about this trade in a podcast, and I believe that I, and maybe even John, advised against it because it feels pretty lateral, except that you're missing the next month. That being said, you do have Jordan Mason. but you also had Braylon Allen. So it's like if Breece Hall got hurt, you'd be good there. I don't really love it, especially as at 4-1. I feel like your team's been winning. I don't know why you'd make this move, but I'll say it's not terrible. I just don't love it and wouldn't have done it myself. But you know, maybe it works out for you. Pinoy Penn says, would you drop Calvin Ridley for Juju in a PPR? Demario Douglas and Dobbs are also available. Yes, I would drop Calvin Ridley for Juju in a PPR. I don't know what this world is coming to. It's disgusting. But Calvin Ridley unironically had 8 targets and 0 catches in week 6. Sorry if I blew him with his eardrums out. It was atrocious. That offense, that quarterback play, this passing attack is untrustable and disastrous. Meanwhile, Juju Smith-Schuster, you're picking up what essentially looks like Patrick Mahomes wide receiver 1. So, yes, I would make that move. I would also drop Ridley for Demario Douglas. I don't know if I'd drop him for Romeo Dobbs, but I would drop him for Juju or Demario Douglas. Chi Kamos Tez asks, what about Tucker, RB? That being Sean Tucker. Chi Kamo is asking, why is Sean Tucker not in my top 5 ads? Valid question. He is my running back 6 in the priority if you're reading the column, which you should be, by the way. 444.com/plans to get the whole list. You can use promo code YouTube for you to get a 25% off discount on the 444 subscription. Tucker is my running back 6. Everybody wants to know he scored 32.7 fantasy points, Matt. How on earth are you not including him highly in the running back priority or the waiver priority in general? And to you, I say, yes, he had 192 yards on 17 touches, but literally 16 to 17 of those touches came as a direct result of Rachaad White missing the game. Prior to this week, Tucker had totaled 3 touches for 21 yards all season. So with White back, which he should be pretty quickly, Sean Tucker could realistically be absolutely nothing rest of season. Now, given what he flashed in this game, has he earned the opportunity to be something? Yes, he has. But am I going to blow my fab bid on him? Absolutely not. And I think that some people in many leagues are going to spend way up on him, and I'm just not willing to do that. I will put in a 1 to 2% bid in deeper leagues, or make him my third or fourth priority after I pick up my defense, so that I have this stash guy if I have room on my bench. Because he clearly does have upside based off what he showed. But Bucky Irving was also great. Rachaad White should be back. I'm not super excited about adding an RB3 on a team, regardless of how well he played in a 1-week spot start. That's my opinion on Sean Tucker. You may see some different thoughts from different waiver wire analysts in the industry, but I'm not blowing the bank on Sean Tucker. William E asks, is Jonathan Brooks worth keeping in IR? Abso-freaking-lutely, William. You are not holding Jonathan Brooks all this time to drop him when he finally is about to come back. I think he should be back in maybe 1 to 2 weeks. And based on what Chuba Hubbard has been doing for this team, which is rushing for like 90 to 130 yards on a weekly basis, apparently, Jonathan Brooks has RB1 upside, legitimate RB1 upside, if he returns healthy, wealthy, and takes the job from Hubbard. Now, I will say that's not a guarantee. He could be eased in slowly. He could be gimpy coming off the ACL injury and never really looks incredible. Hubbard could not give him the full job back based off how well Hubbard has played. All of those things are possible. But if things fall right for Jonathan Brooks to suddenly get a fantasy RB1 off of your IR spot, off of your bench, is an incredible, incredible league-winning end-of-season play. So you are not dropping him. You are holding on to him until like 3 or 4 weeks after his return, where we can decide if he, if Chuba is playing ahead of him and Brooks is averaging 3 yards a carry on 6 carries a game, then we can talk about dropping him. 4 weeks after he returns, not now. Jesse Driscoll says, thoughts on Wicks? We dropped lots of fab on him, SMH. Well, I'm curious what I said to drop on him in the waiver wire column because I don't think it was a ton. Um, you know what? Let's go take a quick gander, shall we? I believe it was week 5. Wicks. He was the number 10 overall ad for me, number 3 at wide receiver, tied with Romeo Dobbs, not tied with Romeo Dobbs, but in a conversation with Romeo Dobbs after Christian Watson's injury. And I had him at 4 to 5% fab bid. And that was with Christian Watson expected to be out a couple weeks. Now Christian Watson is back. So if you read the waiver wire column, you would not have blown a lot of fab on Dontavian Wicks. You would have blown maybe 4 to 5%, if that. Because most likely someone else would have bid more than that and got him, and you wouldn't have spent anything on Dontavian Wicks. I am not interested in Dontavian Wicks. I am moving on. That's all I have to say about that. With Christian Watson back, Jaden Reed, who he is, Wicks is might have 1 or 2 games rest of season that are good, and we will know when they're coming. Macintosh fan, by the way, says Melton or Dobbs with Wicks injured. Yes, I think Wicks got banged up in this game. Dobbs, but I'm not really excited about adding him either. He had 2 pretty fluky touchdowns in this game and had 3 catches for 49 yards. Even with those 2 catches that went for touchdowns. So outside of those 2 fluke plays, he had 1 catch. I'm not excited about him. It's Jaden Reed and Christian Watson here, and it's really just Jaden Reed here, who incidentally did not have a great game. Jermaine Robinson says, please give me a thorough thought on your opinion on trade vetoes. I had a 1-14 trade me Amon-Ra for Ramondre, Downs, and Juju. I have a stable of running backs. Okay, well, I'm curious what you mean by trade vetoes. Are you saying that you've accepted this trade and the league wants to veto it or something like that? I'm not sure. I will give you my opinion on trade vetoes. I will also give you my opinion on this trade since it seems like you're asking that as well. You have a stable of running backs. Then yes, I like this trade for you. You're giving 2 potential like wide receiver 2, 3, 4 type guys, depending on how things fall for Downs and Juju, and a RB3-ish to get a very strong wide receiver, potentially wide receiver 1 in Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I like the trade for you. Having said that, I also do not believe this particular trade should be vetoed. This is the type of trade that can be very mutually beneficial. If that 1-4 team is in a rough spot where they, are starting waiver wire scraps, not even waiver wire scraps, like sub waiver wire scraps, and need to fill in their starting roster and can do that by picking up the strong waiver wire guys that you have, plus Ramondre, who's obviously a draft pick, then that's a reasonable trade that could be mutually beneficial. So if people in your league are trying to veto this, smack them upside the head, send them this audio file, and tell them to get their crap in order because that's nonsense. Also, my opinion on vetoes in general is that they're terrible. They should almost never be in leagues. They should never be a vote situation. It should be commissioner, assuming your commissioner is trustworthy, of course, who vetoes a trade if and only if there is collusion involved, where like a team that is 1-4 is giving up on their season and just sending you all their best plays for nothing or their best players for nothing. That's not the case here. You are giving up 3 startable players to get a really strong number 1 receiver. This is absolutely not vetoable. Very few trades are, unless you're in terrible leagues that are doing a bunch of illegal nonsense. So if you're in Jermaine's league and you're trying to veto this trade, shame on you. Shame, ring bell, shame, ring bell. Oh, Jermaine has provided context. I should look one chat ahead on all of these before I answer. To add, the league is trying to veto. This league complains about every inch of fantasy strategy that I do outside of this trade I'm talking about, so not new with them. League! Jermaine Robinson's league. Take head. Pull head out of posterior. This is absolute nonsense. This is not a tradable or vetoable trade. No, very few trades are vetoable, but this one certainly is not. I'd love to see the full roster for both teams, and I can give you my trade grade on it. DM me on Twitter, Jermaine, and have the rest of your league DM me. Send me a what is that? What is that app where you pay Cameo? I'm not even on Cameo, but pay me for a Cameo, and I will send you a video explaining why this is utter nonsense. I will grade the trade. This is shameful. This should go through. All right. Moving on. You got me all riled up, Jermaine. Zach says, I got Juju last week. How you feel about him? Well, I believe I answered that question above. I feel pretty good about him. Love him as a waiver pickup if he's available. In fact, let me look really quick at how rostered he is. He's 32% rostered. I need to add him to the column. That is my bad. I missed him in the column because he's on bye. I will go and add him. Big pickup would be a high priority for me. Jason Quinn says, trying to get Tyrone Tracy first, dropping Ford. Thank you. Oh, yeah. If you can get Tyrone Tracy over those guys you mentioned, yes, do that. Also, before I move on too far, Juju might be my number one priority on this week. I honestly completely blanked on him because he was on bye. I think I would potentially add him over Downs. So if he's available on your waiver wire, go pick him up. Jesse Driscoll says, Brooks got dropped in my league. Should I drop Wicks for Brooks? Absolutely yes. Shado Kruger says, have Daniels in both leagues at QB, Kyler Murray available in both. Is he worth a stash spot? Picked up Vidal, but have plenty of RB depth, full PPR. Wow. Yes, I don't really think you can leave Kyler Murray on the waiver wire. That's absurd. If anything, you're just playing defense by picking him up. But also, I think you can potentially stream him over Jaden Daniels some weeks, depending on matchups. And it's crazy to say that, like, if Jaden Daniels gets hurt somehow, which he could, given how much he rushes, you suddenly have another top QB1. So, yeah, I'd try to pick him up if you can. I'd prefer to stash him probably over Kamani Vidal if you have RB depth. Jermaine Robinson with a few more notes about the veto situation. My at Jermaine Robinson on Twitter is at Matt Okada. In fact, I will hide the comments to show my Twitter handle down there. That is it for the questions. I feel like we got through those pretty quick. No further questions. We will wrap up the show here. Thanks for being here. If you did not have a chance to read the waiver wire column because you're not subscribed to 444, you should be. Go to 444.com/plans. Use promo code YouTube to get 25% off, and you will get this amazing list, a whole bunch of other names, and within about 15 minutes, I will get Juju Smith-Schuster in there as well, and you can read my thoughts on that. Good stuff, everybody. May your fab bids all succeed, or your waiver wire priority pickups go through. And may you win in week 7. Also, may you win in week 6 if you're waiting on something to happen with Garrett Wilson, Josh Allen, James Cook, who's questionable to play. There's a lot, actually, going on in this Monday Night Football game. Should be a banger, so go enjoy that as well. I will see you next week and or in Tuesday's AMA Discord AMA, if you show up to that, which you should, and on the Friday pod with John Paulson. Adios.